Hi, I'm Sheila Finlayson, alderwoman here in the city of Annapolis, and I'd like to welcome you to our Annapolis. We have with us today Reverend Stephen Tillett. I brought Reverend Tillett on to tell us a little bit about all the many things that he has going. First of all, Reverend Tillett, welcome.
Thank you.
To our show. And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Born and reared in Washington. Went to high school in Washington, St. John's College High School, all boys military Catholic high school. Then went to Wake Forest University for 2 years, finished at American University, went to Howard University for seminary. Have a connection to Annapolis through my mother. Mom taught at Bates, her first assignment out of Teachers College. She taught at Bates from 1946 to 1952, English teacher.
Wow.
I came back, didn't come back, but I came to Annapolis in 2004 when I was assigned to Asbury Broadneck United Methodist Church. So I've been there for the last 11 years.
So what's it like being in Annapolis and at Asbury Broadneck?
It's been a real blessing. I've enjoyed it. They really love to worship there and praise the Lord, and the music ministry, the arts ministries, dance, mime, and whatnot are outstanding. And it's been a good marriage, so I've enjoyed it.
Well, that's wonderful. I know for a fact that you're doing something else in your spare time, because oftentimes I see you in uniform.
I don't have spare time. That's
Oh.
Yes, I'm also an Air Force reservist. So I'm a chaplain lieutenant colonel. I'm assigned a special duty assignment to Arlington National Cemetery, and I do provide military honors, funeral services, committal services over at Arlington.
Wow, so you don't have any spare time, but you're in the reserves.
Right.
You also were the past president of AMA?
Right, the Annapolis Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance. I was the president. Now I'm the treasurer. Bishop Coates and I switched chairs after I was elected president of the Anne Arundel County branch NAACP. So all those things going on.
Well, you and AMA are to be commended because you initiated the rally that was held here in Annapolis in December, right, which was, and I participated, which was an awesome union of the community to send a message about what we expect as far as how all citizens are to be treated in Annapolis.
Right, right. That was, I think, Friday, December 12th, as a matter of fact, just in response to the things that were happening around the country. And you would have people that would quickly say, well, we don't have that happening in Annapolis or Anne Arundel County or Maryland. And it's like, well, it just hasn't, nobody's caught it on film yet, on their phone video or anything like that. But these things are happening all over the country. I mean, even just yesterday, a police officer in South Carolina is arrested for shooting an unarmed citizen in the back 8 times.
8 times.
And his story was, I felt threatened, and so it was self-defense. So if it's self-defense, why are all of the entry wounds for the bullets in the man's back? So, of course, he's been arrested, he's been fired, and is going to be charged with murder 1, as is appropriate. Now, I would be clear and say that he is just a small sliver, represents a small sliver of what happens in law enforcement. Most law enforcement officers, like anybody else, are trying to do a good job during the day, be respectful, want to be respected in return, and want to go home safely to their families. There are a few bad seeds wherever you are, in politics, in ministry, wherever. But I suppose it's more glaring when it's in law enforcement because they have guns and badges and levels of authority that average citizens don't have.
Well, you know, I chair the city's public safety committee, and I work very closely with the police chief and the fire chief and our emergency operations department. And for me, it's very important that our law enforcement send the message that we are here to support the community. And that if there are issues, then we want to address those issues in a collaborative fashion. And I think the rally that was held in December sent that message very clearly that Annapolis is willing to work with the community and desirous. You know, I've asked the police chief to go out into the community and have community meetings and listen to what the community has to say.
And he's done that.
And he is doing that, absolutely.
And Chief Pristoop, actually, I think he was right on my side at one point when we were marching up Main Street, just a short time after knee surgery. So that was,
yes.
But he was there, and have a positive relationship both with Chief Pristoop and also with Chief Altamare, the county police chief. Thus far, they've given me reasons to have optimism and confidence, and so we look forward to continue to work with them.
And we will, from the city's perspective, make sure that does happen.
But while we are working with them, there's also the need to hold folks accountable. And as I've shared with both, so we don't have permanent friends or permanent enemies, just permanent interests. So on an issue where they are absolutely right, I will back them 100% because they are advocating or whatever their position is that's true or accurate. On a position where we disagree, then I will be in opposition to whatever that position is, but it won't be personal. And then after we move past that issue, then whatever the next issue is, we move on. But we just want for the police to be accountable. And you know, in this legislative session that's just about to end, there have been 38 bills proposed in the House, 27 proposed in the Senate, dealing with law enforcement in one way or another, or criminal history, whether it's expungement of records, whether it is deleting things from your record if a crime that is no longer a crime, dealing with the police officer's Bill of Rights, to establish an independent prosecutor in the event of a police-involved shooting or death or accusation of excessive force. And there's been some pushback. It's like, well, we don't have those problems here, everything's fine. But here's the example I try to give them. Let's say, for instance, that there's a problem in the church. There's a financial issue in the church. And I say, the deacons and I are going to look into it, and we'll get back to you. Or if there's some sexual scandal, the deacons and I are going to look into it, we'll get back to you. No matter what report we come back with, even if it was carried out with the utmost integrity, if it does not bring back a guilty verdict, so to speak, nobody's going to buy it. And so what I've been trying to tell them is you want to have citizen police review boards so that you would have a Steve Tillett or a Johnny Calhoun, Reverend Calhoun, or Bishop Coates or Pastor Karen Johnson. You want some people from the community that are on there so that when then, and you know, we're not just talking about you show up without any training and sit in judgment, but instead, you know, you get whatever training is necessary, you go on ride-alongs, you learn about some of the nuts and bolts of police work. And then when the issue comes, if some of us are at the table, if the report comes back and it supports the officer's position, the community, I think, will be a little less likely to have an overwhelmingly negative response to it, because they'll say, well, you know, there was a unanimous report from the committee, and if Reverend Calhoun saw this or Pastor Karen saw this, then I guess that's what it was. Of course, if the report comes back and the community members are all seeing it one way and maybe law enforcement the other, that says something too. But I think it's to help them, because then they can be more transparent, the community is more involved, and there's less potential for, say, what happened in Ferguson, for instance, and then the outcome afterward. You know, these internal investigations that are not transparent, grand jury proceedings that are not the way a typical trial is, with cross-examination and defense and prosecution and whatnot, that's just not helpful to the Republic, especially in this era in the United States where things are so sensitive.
Well, you know, that brings to mind the newspaper editorial board. I think their approach in creating this community these seats on the editorial board is to help bring their work closer to the community. You were one of the first community editors or members of the editorial
Community
board.
advisory board, yeah.
Of the advisory board. Did you see
editorial board? One of the two.
Yeah. Did you see a change? Do you feel like you had an impact on their evaluation and their approach to dealing with the community?
I think they are open to hearing from us. It was a very interesting process, especially because I was on it. My 6 months was during the primary campaigns last year. So we had a lot of the people who were candidates for office coming in for interviews. And number one, it made me kind of tip the hat to them because it takes a lot, as you know, to put yourself out there and say, I think I'm the best person for this position. Please vote for me. It takes a lot to do that. And you, as you know, you get a whole lot of crap when you're out there, a lot of flack flying at you. It's not an easy thing to do. So I had a great deal of respect for them. I also had the opportunity to ask some questions because you would have, and this whole two-party system troubles me because the party's not really working for the citizens in large part, in my opinion. But you would have these almost lockstep positions that if you're a Democrat, you're thinking this, if you're a Republican, you're thinking this. And so the Republican position was often, well, we want to streamline government, cut taxes. And at this point, Anne Arundel County is a very lean county anyway. We're streamlining, you cut anymore, you're cutting to the bone. And so the question that I would ask them, or I would just pose this, I would say, we want our county to be a Champaign County, but you want to do it on a beer budget. And you're going to have to pick and choose. If you want, because remember, former police chief Davis was talking about some of the equipment they had was from the 90s or the 80s. It was 2014 then. That's unacceptable. But if you want state-of-the-art technology, state-of-the-art police work, state-of-the-art education, whatever it is, you have to pay for it. And the way you pay for it is with taxes. That's the way our system functions. So for the knee-jerk response or position of governance to be cut, is not going to work.
Well, we're preparing our city budget as we speak. And that's one of the obstacles I am fighting, because I believe that we have an obligation to provide a certain level of services, to make sure that our police are well equipped with the best technology so they can do the best job. And, there's opposition to raising taxes, of course. I believe there are other revenue generators out there, but that's always a challenge as to how you provide the level of services and pay for those level of services. So, but that's a discussion for another day, a longer discussion. Tell us about your new role as president of the NAACP.
I took office January 1 of this year, 2015. I had been the first vice president a few years beforehand, and then I had a military deployment and gave that up at that point because I was away. I was asked by some members of the community to consider running, as I had not really thought about it. But as I looked at it and just saw some of the challenges, especially, again, Annapolis and Anne Arundel County and Maryland are not immune to what's going on elsewhere in the country. And I thought that I might have something to add to the discussion and just to bring, I would say, a level of civility to the discussion, that I'm not, again, if I end up treating you like an enemy, it's because you've earned it. But I don't approach it initially that way. It's like, okay, so we have a difference of opinion. So let's talk about it and see if we can arrive at some compromise. I know compromise is a dirty word in politics in 2015, but it's how you get things done. So we are as we say on our letterhead, freedom fighters for a new century, and looking to deal with things in disparate areas in the community. Number one, economic development, whether that deals with affordable housing, whether it deals with dealing with addressing the foreclosure crisis in Maryland. And unfortunately, there's so many things in the United States that are driven, well, in the world actually, but in the United States, that are driven by your ethnicity and your economics. And then the further twist is that then ethnicity is used to divide people who have the same economic interests. So then I am lockstep opposed to this white person here or this Latino person there because they're white or they're Latino. But both of y'all, all three of you all are jacked up. You've got pretty much the same level of difficulty dealing with the system or whatever responses you're getting from government. And instead you need to be coming together with a common economic agenda. That's one of the things we see with the Moral Monday movement down in North Carolina. And you have people of all political stripes who are coming together because they're beginning to see this isn't a black issue, it's not a white issue, it's an economic issue, it's a fairness issue. I remember that there was a mayor, a conservative Republican mayor in North Carolina who marched, who walked from North Carolina to Washington to protest some of the budget cut to Medicare and the opposition to the Affordable Care Act. And he said, I'm a right-wing Republican. I don't agree with President Obama on much. However, the policies that you are initiating are going to result in rural hospitals closing. And so the closest hospital to my community is 50, 60 miles away. That's unacceptable. So that, again, when we approach it from a different perspective, we find common ground. We're not going to agree on everything. I mean, you know, if you're married, you know, you're not going to agree on everything. You got brothers and sisters, friends. You don't agree on everything. But on those things that we can agree, we need to be looking for common ground rather than just knee-jerk from the get-go. I oppose you. whatever you say, I'm going to oppose it, because that just doesn't make sense. It's not the way to do business.
You're absolutely right. I couldn't agree with you more. You touched on housing. You know, I heard a statistic just a few nights ago that in the city of Annapolis, only 17% of African Americans own their own homes, which is an appalling figure for me. Do you have any ideas or, you know, programs or concepts that we could begin to embrace that would help us to move people into home ownership?
Well, actually, our Economic Development Committee Chair, Derek Matthews, is looking to sponsor some workshops and seminars in the community that are going to deal with home ownership, cleaning up your credit so that you can qualify for home ownership. But then also, I mentioned the foreclosure crisis, and I want to get back to that because if you have a home, you should be able, you know, ideally you should be able to keep it. That's a concern. And then here is where, again, ethnicity plays a role, that there are some communities that are almost exactly similar if you look at them financially. But one might be a white community, one might be a black community. And so in the white community, there are packages being offered by banks and lending institutions to help them to recover from the Great Recession of 2008 when the economy tanked. Whereas in the African American community, those same things are not being offered. So in the white community, they're being able to, you know, and it's not happening all the time because a lot of them are being messed over too, but more so than in the African American community, they're being able to rescue their homes, get a new modified mortgage, and it makes a difference. They did a study in the DC metro area, and I think they said that the Reston, Virginia community was very, very similar in profile to Fort Washington, Maryland. Reston was recovering, Fort Washington was not. The only difference between the two communities is that Reston is majority white, at Fort Washington is majority African American. That's appalling. I call that reverse redlining. It's like, okay, well, they've got homes, but now we're not going to give them financial packages that they need to rescue those homes. I have a good friend who purchased a house in Prince George's County in 2006. The purchase price was, I think, around $350. The last tax assessment for the property was a little bit under 100, like 90 something. Purchased in 2006, recession hits in 2008, and then this great collapse. And so now in 2015, well, this house that you paid $350 for, that your mortgage is calibrated at $350 for, is now only assessed at $95.
That's incredible.
And because this individual is a responsible person with their credit, works, has a job that pays fairly well, they're not even repair options, a right sizing option for them. That's unfair. And so what that will then force that person to do eventually is just to walk into the lender and hand them the keys and say, you would not work with me to reduce my mortgage from a $350,000 level to now something very close to where it's valued. Because at the end of the day, Sheila, we understand that if you have a 30-year mortgage, the holder of the mortgage or the recipient of the mortgage, holder of the deed, is going to get 3 times that you're going to pay 3 times the value. So if you buy a house for $100,000 in 30 years, you're going to have paid them $300,000. So even if you're not getting $350, if you're only getting $100, over 30 years, that's $300,000 for a house that probably cost you $60, $70 to build. You're still making money as the builder and the lender, but the homeowner isn't getting screwed. So those are the kinds of things that are trying to protect our citizens as far as foreclosure is concerned, home ownership, credit repair. So those are some of the things that we want to do to try and help our folks be in a better position to elevate themselves economically.
Sounds like you have your hands full.
We do. We do. And then, of course, on the political side, we're dealing with, or legislative side, we're dealing with the various bills that came up. Many of them were not successful in this last session, but they should not think for a minute that we're done. There are a couple of committee chairs where if a bill comes to their committee, it's pretty much dead on arrival. And it's like, that's not why you were elected. You were not elected to hinder, to just let it get to the floor for full airing, for debate and a vote. Because somewhere along the line, God forbid, but chances go around, something will happen in the state of Maryland, in Anne Arundel County, in Annapolis. And it won't be a surprise. It will surprise the majority of the white community. Oh, this is so rare. This never happens. We're surprised it happened here. And for a majority of the black community, it'll be like, welcome to our life. This is not a surprise to us. So rather than legislating in response to, reactively, be proactive and put some of these things in place so that then if and when something happens, the police and community can work more in a sense of accord, and the community and the political establishment can work in more of a sense of accord to address and resolve the issue.
Well, it sounds like those bills that didn't pass this year will be coming back.
Oh, indeed.
Absolutely. What about voters' rights? Do we see any attempts to infringe upon voters' rights?
I am not aware of any attempts in Maryland. Maryland tending to be a more progressive state. But it is happening around the country. And one example that to me is absolutely galling is in the state of Texas, which is the second most populous state in the union, I believe. Over the course of, I think, about 10 years concurrent with George W. Bush's administration, there were tens of millions of votes cast in the state of Texas. And there were 2, not 2,000, not 20,000, not 200,000, 2 examples of voter fraud. Yet they felt the need to, it was like a solution looking for a problem. So they passed these laws that make it harder for people to vote. harder for young people to vote, for college students to vote. And they can call it what they want. Anyone who's a student of the political game knows what you're trying to do is sort of like in basketball. We just finished with March Madness. In basketball, sometimes you're trying to let the air out of the ball and just play out the clock because we've got this lead, we want to hold on to it. And that's happening there. It's like, well, there's probably a majority of the populace that do not agree with our positions. And since we're not going to change our positions, we need to change the electorate. So we will hinder young people from being able to vote. We'll hinder older people from being able to vote. We'll make it harder for, that's nonsense. And then we want to know why, as a democracy, the United States has one of the lowest rates of voter turnout on the planet. And in part it's because, well, number one, people are sick of the foolishness. It's like, okay, Congress, we understand you don't like Obama, but he's our president, you're our Congress. Now we need you all to work together on our behalf, rather than, again, try to let the air out of the ball and wait. Okay, well, what did the now Majority Leader McConnell say? Our objective is to make, our number one priority is to make President Obama a one-term president. Okay, well, now he's a two-term president, so you're going to wait another 4 years and do nothing for 4 more years?
And stop everything that he has done.
Right, or trying to go back and repeal, and just reading some reports on what the effects would be if they were successful, that would be catastrophic, because there's so many things in healthcare that are already moving in a direction, and that's like trying to turn an ocean liner down on a dime. You turn it around, you know, and you know what would happen then, capsize. So stop playing games, do the work of the people that the people sent you there to do. Unfortunately, there are some segments of the population that are telling their representatives, don't compromise. Whatever you do, don't work with those people. Well, if that's the case, don't be a legislator, because legislation and the legislative process is about giving and taking and compromise to do what's best for the people. So we'll be watching on all of those, on many of those scores and subjects and aspects, and we will do what we need to do to advocate on behalf of well, you know, as the president of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, I guess that makes me president of everybody, because everybody is some color.
That's right.
Okay, so
that's right.
But to advocate on behalf of colored people, of economically disadvantaged people, for what makes sense, for common sense outcomes. Well,
I just want to say thank you for all that you're doing in our community. And if residents would like to reach out to you to join the NAACP, to come visit you at your church, how would they reach you?
Well, they could email me at, and this is a new email address for me, I think it's president@AnneCountyNAACP.org. My cell number is 443-883-5151.
And we'll make sure that we run that across the bottom of the screen also.
Good. So I will look in my iPad, and if I've gotten it wrong, we'll correct it.
So, well, wonderful. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we finish today?
I just thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation. And again, I'm looking for partners who are willing to roll up their sleeves and do the hard work of building community, that more perfect union. One other thing I will say before we sign off, one of the unexpected but wonderful blessings that has occurred as a result of the rally on December 12th, we met some colleagues that we had not really seen before. Maybe we'd see them across the room in a meeting but didn't know them by name, didn't know their story. Some of our white colleagues who came out there and marched with us. And since then, there has been a coming together of African American and Latino and white clergy. And we're having what we're calling a sacred conversation on race. And we're just really trying to address some of the things that keep us divided, look at those areas where we absolutely should be working together, and to do so. And then we will hopefully lead our congregations in that direction as well. Anne Arundel County has kind of a challenged history over the years with respect to issues of race and class, and we're hoping to kind of tear some of those walls down. So basically, when we have been proactively involved in doing kingdom work, these are then opportunities that come from it. And so that is something that's very close to my heart, that we are meeting new brothers and sisters, that we are finding kinship and like-mindedness that we hope will help to elevate and move Annapolis and Anne Arundel forward.
Well, I have to say, I'm glad to hear that, and feel free to talk to us, excuse me, about your work with the diverse group of ministers. I have to say that during that rally, the three most moving parts of that rally was the prayer at the top of Main Street, standing in front of on the State House steps, or on the backside of the State House.
The Taney statue. Where
the Taney statue is, when the white ministers came forward to offer prayers. And then, of course, I have to give kudos to Reagan Parker.
Reagan Parker, one of my members.
One of your members and my representative on the Annapolis Education Commission, freshman at Annapolis High School, who was awesome.
Yes.
Talking about the young leading, she's definitely a leader in our community already. So I can see the extension beyond that with the diverse group of ministers. So we wish you well, and please come back.
And when you mention Reagan, I'm sorry that Reagan is also trying to help reestablish the youth chapter within ACP. So they will work underneath the Anne Arundel County branch. And we just want to help to equip our young people for how to advocate for themselves in a positive way, in a powerful way. And so the National Convention in July this year is in Philadelphia, driving distance. And so we're trying to pull together a group of young people, take them up there for a few days so they can observe the AXO competition, which is an academic and arts competition. Young people from all around the country compete in 29 different areas, whether it's spoken word, academics, dance, music, whatever. We will not organize that chapter well enough in time for them to compete this year, but they will go and observe. They will attend the convention for a few days. And then next year, wherever the convention will be, they will be full participants. So we're trying to get our young people to learn to use their voice in a productive way.
Well, if she is an example of the young people that you're recruiting, they're going to be awesome.
Yeah.
They are awesome. So again, Reverend Stephen Tillett from Asbury Broadneck United Methodist Church, president of NAACP, reservist, a man of the community, of the cloth and of the community. Again, thank you for being with us and sharing a lot about what you're doing in the community. And I invite you back at any time to keep us up on the good things that are going on with you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bless you.
My